Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Undetermined States of America podcast. I'm super excited to have my third guest on the podcast, Leonora Camner, who is the executive director of Democracy Without Elections. Leonora, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks so much for this interview.
Yeah, no problem. I think you were technically the very first person I talked to in the deliberative democracy space. So then you introduced me to Phil, then introduced me to Nick. So I have you to thank for introducing me to this awesome, colorful, deliberative democracy space. So thank you
Yeah, of course.
on the air.
I want to connect people to our network, our exciting network of sortition and deliberative democracy advocates.
Yeah. Well, something I really admired that you do or did is when I think I signed up for Democracy Without Elections, and then you emailed me saying, "Hey, thanks for joining. I'd love to get to know you if you'd like to schedule a call." And at first, I thought it was an automated thing or something, but it was real, and it was you, and I appreciate that. Because yeah, it just made it feel very human and down to earth. So kudos, Leonora,
Thank you.
for
It's
doing
funny you
that.
say that because I was thinking maybe I should start automating that, but I do genuinely want to have one-on-one conversations with everybody that joins TWE. Now, we have a new website that we just
Oh,
launched.
cool.
That the goal for that website is to make it easier to access everything. And once you become a member, there's a big button right there on the member page that says, book a meeting with me. So, I just want to make sure that I'm able to connect with everybody. Everybody brings something unique to this, and maybe they haven't thought about ways that they can get involved, or maybe people like you, they already have projects, and it's about, okay, how can we support them and get them connected to other people? So yeah, I think it's an important part of the process.
I agree. Yeah, I am a community organizer myself. My main job, Brooklyn Psychedelic Society, and a lot of it is getting to know people, asking them what draws them to it. And honestly, I haven't done something like that with like getting to know every single new person, but I think it's a really excellent way to build a foundational movement and community. So, for our listeners, why don't you, if you're down, tell us about yourself, Leonora? Where are you from, and what's your kind of general personal story arc of your professional, personal world, and how you think about things, and then what, yeah, eventually got you interested in deliberative democracy?
Yeah. Thanks. That's a lot of stuff to cover. But
We'll take the full hour.
until a couple years ago, I was the executive director of Abundant Housing LA, which is a pro-housing organization. It's a part of the YIMBY Yes in My Backyard movement. And, that's where I learned about community organizing and, nonprofit management, and political campaigns, and just sort of like how politics works. And I think when I started out doing that, I had this idea that we would be able to explain to our political representatives the facts about the housing crisis and sort of like connect them with the voices on the ground, so that they can see, there's like an urgent housing crisis, and here are sort of the evidence-based solutions that are out there, that make a lot of sense, that, don't cost a lot of money. So I don't want to get into the policies that we advocated for. I feel myself going down that rabbit hole, but the point of it is that I think over time, I just, even though I think that the mission is so important, I'm really grateful, for everybody continuing that mission at Abundant Housing and the other YIBI organizations. I think I became like very disillusioned with the political process. And in some ways organizing itself. So just this idea that we could, out organize the NIMBYs, like the not in my backyard people. Um, so I could share a story that I think kind of explains this,
Please.
which is, one time a local elected called me up and was like, we have this affordable housing project that's coming up. It's really important for this community, but we're getting a lot of backlash from the NIMBYs. They probably didn't use that exact word because I know, that can be a very polarizing term to say NIMBYs. But basically, like the anti-housing people. So they're like, oh, we're going to get 100 of these NIMBYs out at this community meeting about the affordable housing project, and we need you to organize like as many, if not more, pro-housing people. And I'm like, okay, that I can't realistically organize that number of people for this specific location overnight. But it just really stuck with me because, I just wanted to say, and I think I did say this at the time, it's like if you're the elected representative and, you have a job to deliver housing solutions for this community, and this affordable housing project is important and necessary, and it's, people in the community need it. It's, it's not my job to give you the political cover to do that. Like you have to be able to do that job, and you have to be able to select a process, like an actual process that is going to, not create this sort of like local battles, because I think something that I saw personally, and I think a lot of people have seen, is that these battles get like really ugly and personal. And, like I've seen people like physically attacked. I've seen, people threatened, like, it's very common if you go out to advocate for things that, on any issue, like people will try to, dox you, find your employer, make those complaints. Like there's like it's actually hostile to put people like to have a system where we're pitting people against each other and we're sort of like, okay, whoever can shout the loudest is going to win on this issue, when it's like, okay, take a step back. We're talking about an affordable housing project, that is just objectively necessary to deal with this housing crisis. So I became interested in this idea of lottery-based democracy, also called sortition.
Well,
And
before we go into that, if I could just ask a couple questions on your organizing, your disillusionment, because I do want to, obviously, I want to get to sortition and autocracy.
yeah,
Yeah, it just sounds like, I also like that point you made that we have this kind of combative fighting based system of like with what group can kind of overcome the other group to get its desired policy outcomes made. And then, yeah, the like elected official who shall go unnamed, whoever that might be, kind of asking you as an organizer to do the work that you would imagine an elected official should have the capacity or ability to do. It just makes me kind of think and realize that, like, because when we think of like, when I think like deliberative democracy space, which obviously we'll get into, we think of like, okay, well, who is getting in power? Like, what kind of people are actually going to be put in power? And that's only one side of the coin. And the other side of the coin, which you're pointing to, is like, well, what actually happens once they have the power and like behind closed doors? And what are the actual kinetics and dynamics of like people and ideas? And what you're pointing to with what you're sharing, how I'm hearing it, is that like the elected officials they're not really equipped or kind of thinking of themselves as like mobilizers or organizers. It's just this kind of like brutal kind of war like simulation game where like different voices and actors are kind of competing with each other. And yeah, like the whole process is kind of muddled within. Yeah.
right. I think you said it exactly. And this isn't my only issue with it or my only experience with elected officials that really disillusioned me, but it's one thing that I want to highlight because I think people don't like, they're not really aware of it. And I went all the way up to Sacramento recently to speak at this hearing about the way we do community input in the state. And I personally spent my time going up there to tell them like the way that we do community input in the state in California. I don't know, did I say California? The way we
Yeah,
do
this is in
community input
California.
here, yeah, it is tearing communities apart. It's broken. It's leading to terrible results. And what I said is that it's not it's actually not an exaggeration. Like, I know it sounds extreme when I say this, but the way that we do community input, the status quo of community input, is actually leading to the destruction of like communities and people's lives, because like that's why we don't have enough housing. That's why we don't have like proper environmental policy. Like, we can't deal with basic issues like sorry, I think my internet went out for a second there. But yeah, we can't deal with basic issues like fires and housing because the political process is broken. And like a big part of that is the community input and like pitting people against each other in these local wars. So that's one side of it. And then there's sort of like what you were really emphasizing, which is that the electeds sort of like outsource the work that they have to do to get policies to be supported that they know are necessary. Like, they outsource that to organizers and like communities and like community organizations. It's like I think like if you and anybody else who's been in organizing, I'm sure you've had this experience where you go to the electeds and they're like, oh, I agree, this thing is really good and necessary, but it's like you haven't succeeded in getting like the support for this. And so it's like, it's not really my fault or like my job. This is really on you. And I don't know. That was crazy to me. Like that, like I still think about how crazy that is. But then the
That is
other thing,
crazy.
yeah.
Oh, sorry. Well, I was gonna say because like I work in the field of my day job, which I'm passionate about and excited about. It's not just my day job, but something I help create is like advocating for psychedelics and allowing those to be more accessible. And it's a little more of a niche issue, and it's important, but also like the housing crisis in LA and in California seems really bad when I've read about it. And like I could see a representative saying you got to do more time building momentum around this niche psychedelic issue, but like housing, that's like something that it shouldn't be some weird topic that you have to kind of barge down the door to get help with. So I could see why you would be exasperated with that, or just I don't know. I haven't done a study, but just like I'm imagining politicians themselves are just feeling completely overbooked and overworked for like they probably can't get anything done either. Like I'm sure I know some people like Terry Brashes. I don't know how to say his last name, but
Barishas.
Nick has mentioned him. Barishas, yeah, former politician. Like I'd would like to interview him eventually. But yeah, just on the inside, I'm sure they're feeling disempowered as well. But not to say, anyways,
No, I
because
think
that's
that's
your
true.
issue. Is something everyone should be for, even if they
Yeah.
disagree, that they should want to figure it out.
Yeah, like a functional political and democratic process should be able to solve a problem like that. And it shouldn't, depend on like this or that organizer. Like, it should, like, a functional government needs to be able to solve something like housing. And so that's a deeper problem than just like, did we like organize enough people and did we do enough advocacy? And also, I think Terry Burchess would be a great person to interview. I think he has like so many great things to say. And I think also what you said was really true, which is that the electeds themselves, I don't mean to paint them all with a negative brush. Like, I've seen a lot of people run for office and win office that I think are really great, solid people who have great visions. And then I think just unfortunately across the board, once they get into office, they're sort of like confronted with the reality of what they're unable to accomplish. And, I don't think that's like a solution or I don't think it's an issue where the solution is just you have to elect better people. Like I think that there are a lot of
Yeah.
good people elected, and then it's like the nature of politics and like the reality that they have to keep winning elections, which is like sometimes we talk about that cynically, but it is important for like if you help get an elected in office that you really support and you like their vision, okay, you don't want to see all of that eroded by them not continuing to win elections. But having to do that means making political deals that are so like engaging in a game of politics that's so toxic and dysfunctional that it's like that vision gets gets eroded to the point where it's like we're only talking about marginal progress on important issues. And that's just not, I don't think that should be acceptable to anybody who cares about seeing progress on issues, whatever the issue is, whether it's psychedelics or housing, or the environment or anything. It's like, we have to take a hard look at the reality. It's like, we're not going to make meaningful progress on these issues with this continually dysfunctional system, even if we elect good people, even if we elect people that agree with us. And then the other thing,
Yeah.
I just want to mention one more thing about
Please.
electeds that is like maybe the most important point, and I sort of like maybe should have led with it, but the other
I
thing
can edit the video to swap it.
okay, that would be good.
Okay.
Yeah, the other thing that is really important is that once these electeds are in office and they're making decisions about like these important issues, and, like we've kind of talked about it, they have like personal interest in the outcomes, okay, because they have to think about future elections, they have to think about fundraising, like they have to think about the coalitions, like even ones that they're doing good work, they're like they're helping to lead and build coalitions for things that they care about. That's rare, but like even that, it's like they will endanger these issues with like certain decisions or votes, and it's like, and unfortunately a lot of them, they're also doing it for like selfish personal reasons, like they want to remain in power, they have like transactional relationships, like they're influenced by lobbyists. Unfortunately, like that is really, really common. And so when it comes to an issue like housing, for example, but on other issues too, they're not guided by the facts and the expertise. And so I think that's the headline number one biggest dysfunction of this whole thing to me, is that we don't have people able to like make an impartial, expert guided or fact guided decision about these really important issues. And it's like, these people often, they're not personally affected by the outcome. Like they already have housing. They already live in a single family home probably. So, it's not going to affect them, but, it might affect their ability to get reelected if they support affordable housing. It might affect like their campaign donations, many considerations there. So it's like, that's where I think it's so important to have a process where you have impartial decision makers, and we're like a million miles away from that.
Yeah. And that's focused on the social political problem directly, rather than this kind of pipeline of incentivized gunk that we all have to wade through to get anything done. And when we do get something done, it's marginal improvement and probably prioritized around what's ever most likely to lead to future elections being won or donors being satisfied. Like the metaphor I've been using that I probably didn't fully come up with, but like I've been saying, we're running Windows 1776 for our system of government. And I say it's corrupt like an old computer is corrupt. Like, yes, there are bad faith actors and like, like the Bob Mendez's out there, like putting gold bars in his Mercedes and driving off with like a bag of money, like that kind of corruption, like quid pro quo corruption. But then this more systemic corruption, which I think most Americans are familiar with when they have like an outdated phone or computer. It's like, look, the thing just isn't functioning. And like when you want to do something kind of simple, it requires all of these other things and people and actors. And it's just like, it's such a waste of energy and time. And we have to exert ourselves so much just for these marginal differences. And I think that's what people are kind of fed up with and sick of, is that like your very headline is that, hey, the system is just like not working. It's like, it's not even there's like evil conspiratorial people, though there might be, is just like
Yeah.
they're focused on the short term. The world's way more complicated than it was 250 years ago. Go figure. Yeah. Anyways, so I totally agree with you, and I like you're saying that that's what you think should be one of the headline takeaways for people. Like, hey, this, like, how would you kind of like, maybe would you summarize it as corruption, or do you have like another way that you would want to put it?
Well,
Or
I think I would say
obsolescence?
dysfunction. I would say dysfunction,
Dysfunction.
and like part of that dysfunction is the corruption. But like I don't think that's the entirety of it. Like I think corruption is a big part of it. Um, but I just think, I mean, there's just like a larger dysfunction that isn't a part of like the personal feelings of like people being selfish. So that's probably how I would put it.
Yeah. Well, so you've been you're a little disenchanted and seeing how screwy the system is, and yeah, obsolete and dysfunctional it is. And then a dove came with a ray of light or something, and you discovered deliberate. So how did you first stumble upon deliberative democracy,
Yeah,
or like
it's
how did you make
funny.
that transition?
It's funny
Was there a dove?
the dove imagery because it did kind of come into my life like a ray of sunshine. It's kind of cheesy to say that,
Yay.
but because I was thinking for a while there, I was like, people were, I'd complain about these things. I'm like, this, like the way that we're doing elections is horrible. The lack of progress, the impossibility of progress in these issues is horrible. And, I'd tell people who are very, high up in politics and organizing about these concerns, and they'd just be like, this is just this is democracy. This is just how democracy is.
Yeah.
And you just have to play the game. There's no other way. And, I really took that to heart, and I was like, well, I don't know. Like, I actually am not sure that I think democracy is good anymore if this is democracy, because like this is not good, and this is not, a positive vision to me. So I was like, I don't think, I don't think that I even support this. And that was a really sad, that's like a depressing, feeling to have about democracy, is like, do I even believe in it? And then it was like around that time, one of our volunteers mentioned, like, there's this cool idea out there, um, where like you could have random people, in office. And I was like, oh, haha, what a fun, crazy idea. But it was like, it really stuck with me because I was like, that actually makes a lot of sense. I'm like, random people would actually be a lot better than the people that we do have, in government. Okay, it's like when we talk about sortition, we're not usually talking about replacing, like just literally replacing elected representatives with random people. But just as a thought experiment, would that really be so bad, honestly? Like, the average person is like really capable of making good decisions. I think like we don't give them credit for that, and the process kind of elevates, very power hungry people, to put it mildly. So it's like you'd probably be better off with a random person, in my opinion. But it just, like, I don't know, the idea stuck with me, and I finally, like, I Googled it. I'm like, is this like a real idea? Like, are people out there who like think that, we should have random people in government? So I Googled it, and I found the term sortition, and I found Sortition Foundation. I'm like, oh my God, this is a real thing. And I was really excited. I signed up immediately, and Sortition Foundation connected me with um, Democracy Without Elections, and that's how I found like this great LA community of Sortition advocates, and that's why we now have this group called Public Democracy LA, which is doing great things in LA. We just completed a model assembly, um, so that's the whole story of how I discovered it.
How about now? Okay, great. I don't know what happened there. I seem to always have tech issues. This stinking platform. All right. So you were saying that, yeah, a volunteer told you about this, and it seemed like a kooky idea. Random people, like in your exasperation, like, oh yeah, that'd be so much better. Just have randos instead. Looked into it, and like, oh my gosh, this is a thing. Not only is it a thing, but yeah, it's been going on since ancient Athens. I actually learned recently, I think it was on this Denizens podcast, that like I think there was like a 700 person council in ancient Athens at one point, and only 100 of them were actually electeds, and the other 600 were randomly selected citizens. So it was kind of like common knowledge that elections were kind of oligarchic. And
Goodness.
yeah, and I think there's like this interesting cultural quirk about American culture, is that like we were taught so much about democracy and a government buying for the people, which I think was emphasized a whole bunch, and elections were kind of tightly tied to that. But I think we've drank more of the Kool-Aid on like democracy and a government buying for the people than necessarily elections, and so it's kind of like I hate to use this phrase, like make elections thought of as oligarchic again. It could be the kind of like because I think the American people are kind of like, not to generalize, but I think they're kind of waking up to that. Like they have very little faith in the electoral system. Um, so yeah, so you did have this kind of like awakening, it sounds like, or like, and I can relate to that story. I first read about Sortition in 2014 with Alex Guerrero's article in Aeon, and I was like, this just makes so much more intuitive sense that this would work. Not just that they're just completely random people, and they have like a learning phase and deliberate towards consensus. So, and then yeah, how did you get actually? So the democracy without elections already was up and running, and then yeah, how did you become the executive director? Hmm. Yeah, that's really cool. That is really cool. Um, we're slightly skipping ahead because it's kind of a more niche application of sortition, but the kind of strategy of applying sortition as like just a kind of process in places in addition to but outside of elections is something that is interesting to me, and you're doing with your nonprofit Democracy Without Elections with your randomly selected board. I was talking to someone else who we did an event last weekend in Manhattan. It went really well, and someone from the city came that one of our guests brought, and they were talking about the woes of like really noble working in the city and like good people and good vision, but like just so often stuck and mired in bureaucratic processes, just kind of like par for the course of how people think, like how bureaucracy functions. I'm like, I thought, man, it'd be so cool if we were able to bring sortition to a bureaucratic department, which has sometimes hundreds, sometimes thousands of people, randomly select them, and then use that to kind of gain traction for the movement to like actually. Because if you kind of, and I'm curious if you're thinking on this, I don't want to get too heady too quickly of like the philosophy of it, but I'm on this kick.
The most
If
famous.
you kind of abstract away like what happens in sortition, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you definitely know more about this than I do. I'm still learning, but it's like you randomly select people, and then there is a learning phase, and then you deliberate towards consensus. But the kind of idea is that the kind of most strategic, best way to think about it is actually kind of locked away in the minds and hearts of this kind of formerly dispersed group. And if you give them time to get to know each other and actually think about it, because they a lot of them have the best interest of the community of which they are a part in mind, whether it's a bureaucratic department or a citizen of a city or a citizen of a nation or a state, because most people do care. They haven't been eroded by kind of cronyism yet, or like Mercedes-Benz deals and etc. Anyways, that is kind of one strategy, and I'm sure there's you might know of orgs that are doing that, but your board idea kind of made me think of that, of like applying sortition and actually strategic ways to just get the kind of familiarity of that kind of algorithm of randomly gather, rapport building, learning, deliberation, consensus, you know?
Year, and um, the strong voice membership was that they wanted to see like more local work, and I think that makes a lot of sense because that's where, you can really reach people and make connections and connect with, you're more likely to be able to get the attention of electeds, when you're like at that more local level. Um, and like a lot of the citizens assemblies that have been done have been local, like the Petaluma Fairgrounds. So, so people are interested in that local. That's so we our goal is to build out a network of local chapters across the country, and fortunately, we have a number of volunteers already that are doing that. Just like how we have Public Democracy LA here in LA, we want to see that ideally everywhere.
Yeah. So, Democracy Elections has a randomly selected board, which is pretty cool. And would you like to share kind of what the mission and vision and strategy of your nonprofit is?
Within DWE for sure. I would say that but that's not to say like it's the biggest local initiative that's happening, because I think there's like a lot of other local initiatives that I wouldn't say that they're like, I wouldn't give Democracy Without Elections credit for what Phil Lindsay is doing. But I think we would like Democracy Without Elections to be a space where we're supporting things that Phil's working on, like exactly in the way um, about where it's like you got involved with Democracy Without Elections, and we plug you into supporting local initiatives that people are working on. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that.
Cool. And is that because you're based in Southern California, correct? Cool. So, would you say the LA chapter is kind of the biggest for now, or the most kind of active?
Yeah. Well, I think it's of course up to each local chapter, but generally, yeah, they want to spread the word about the value of, a civic or assembly, and, see that happen in their local community. And I think, it's not like some of the other organizing work we talked about where, you have to shout really loud at the electeds, because I think in this case it's like,
Yeah, cool. And yeah, I think I helped facilitate one of your monthly meetings, which was really fun a few months ago.
oh, people,
No problem. Yeah, that's fishing for a thank you. You already
community.
thanked me, so. Oh, do you remember when I did that? So, yes. Because, yeah, there's like three general layers of government ish, like political science 101, like the kind of local, state, and then federal. And I have heard studies that say something like if you have, if enough local constituents um, annoy a local official or like get in front of them, they will pay more attention. Like, and it doesn't take that many people, I don't think, because people actually taking the time to get off their TikTok or Instagram trance and to like go outside and like actually meet other people and do stuff. There's something like, wow, they actually unplug from the dopamine funnel to like do something. This must be really important. So, is it, do the chapters, are they actually trying to influence policy, or at least have a citizen assembly approach to local policy?
Well, I I'm not sure if it was a question, but I agree.
Yeah. So, yeah, I have a few questions I sent you that these all kind of bundle together with because Well, one is kind of like I'm biased. You're also probably biased. I'm curious your response to this. Of like, I think this is like one of the most important things we could focus on because to me, if we don't have a functioning government or a responsive government, then we cannot address the kind of problems that require some sort of coordinating entity to address. So one, and we could do this in any order you want, but like one, I'm curious why you think Americans or people should focus on deliberative democracy perhaps more than other issues that can occupy their um, activist time, if you will. Because I think you can, I think the argument can be made they should, but I'm curious what your thoughts are on that. And the second question is, and it's very different. These are two big questions, but like I do think one of the biggest roadblocks to deliberative democracy is kind of like cultural and educational. That we kind of need to like disentangle people from having democracy and elections as synonyms, and then kind of educate them on why we think deliberative democracy is the kind of way forward. Those are two big ones. I'm curious if one of those two questions speaks to you first that you'd like to take a stab at.
In an impartial way. That's the actual meaning of democracy, which is like democracy doesn't just
The
mean
second one was more of a statement.
like people
Yes.
are in charge. It means like
I guess my
regular
question is
people.
how. Sorry, yeah, I don't want to. How would we go about changing that cultural kind of roadblock? That's a yeah.
Sortition, that's so random. I like it. I like it, although people, I, I
Yeah,
do like it. I think it does make me think of this interesting bring up in this space, which is that apparently most people have a very negative reaction to the word random. Like people have a negative connotation, which is kind of surprising to me because I feel like I have a positive, a positive association with it. I think
yes.
this is a powerful statistical tool and, is used in important important applications like science and math. So randomness, but apparently a lot of people feel like a negative association with that word. So I think maybe
They are.
people like, oh, you shouldn't use that word in like titles or things. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, I thought of a tagline for the movement at our event last week. We call it Sortition, That's So Random.
String of things,
Yeah, we could say that's so random. That's the or it's so random. If it was
organizing,
like
there's
a
like,
soda or
a
something.
capture of systems and, it's just like these battles that go on and
Creative.
like tug of war between different interests. And it's like, but if you have randomness, like you have a real cross section what regular people think on something and it's like a statistically valid cross section. So it's like, okay, yeah, you might have a few outliers here and there, but you're kind of taking the temperature of of people that way in a way that like people can't manipulate. Like they can't, you know, buy a bunch of target that like that specific group, because it's like it's one thing to run ads when it's like you're trying to influence the general population, but it's like it's unrealistic to run ads. I feel like you need to target
I could
like
see that maybe because it has like a connotation of like absurdity or like lack of order or like it. I think most people probably like want stability and like predictability, and like the word random implies like
be able to
I think Americans, unfortunately, we do have like a lot of fear of each other and other
recruit.
people, and so the idea of like random Americans, especially with all the headlines we see and stuff, even though statistically we're pretty safe, I think,
Well,
ish. But that's a good point. So yeah, the word random might be a bit of a stumbling block, perhaps.
unlikely that each every dollar you have much impact. So it's like you wouldn't have a good return on that investment. So I hope I explained that clearly. But it's just like it's
Yeah,
very hard to influence those kinds of things with even like very clever or well-funded campaigns. So it's like to me, randomness is stability. But I hear you. Like I think most people think randomness is stability. Yeah. Yeah. I think no. No. All right. You're gonna say another point.
yeah. I wonder if the word lottery has a better connotation because, like, we do love our lotto here in the US, and, like, it has this kind of dream of, like, winning it big, even though it's statistically unlikely. Because if we say selected by lottery, but either way, the high level. Go ahead, sorry. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, I was saying it's like how I'm thinking of it, and I'm still figuring out, and I've been so grateful to how open like you've been to talking, and like Phil and Nick, and I'm just like beginning the tip of the iceberg, meeting the people in this field, and like I'm trying to think, well, how can this inform how I'm thinking about undetermined states of America and what my role could be in this field, and it's very clearly one of the main. There's like multiple angles this needs to be. I hate to say attacked from because I want to get out of warring language into more cooperative, collaborative language. But yeah, like and like the cultural educational piece is like a really big one. Like just getting people to understand the kind of concept because they're and to have that kind of aha moment that you and I have had that I think most people could get to. And then another strategic lane I'm thinking of is like, well, if there was some big win, like, wow, the MTA employed this sort like lotocratic or lottery approach to their decision making within the department, and like it got these huge gains in efficiency and like things were figured out, that's another kind of strategic way, like dispersing sortition through kind of out different decision making bodies within the country, you know? I'm kind of just
And then
thinking of like meta strategic level because I think the cultural educational one is really big. But then it does seem like yeah, I'm curious what you're thinking strategically of how we could actually get sortition to be implemented in the US, whether local, state, or national.
have the power of government that you would have if like you had like an official constitutional assembly, for example. But I still think that's powerful to just democracy. You know, this idea that democracy is just a part of you know people that we can always do real democracy. We don't have to anybody's permission. It doesn't have to be codified anywhere. Like democracy is always available to us to do. And so I find that idea kind of powerful. So I'd like to see something like that happen myself. Um, well, sometimes I do assembly. Like I think that there was like a um I'm blanking on the name. I need to think about it. I think that there are assemblies that were just they were like demonstrations assemblies that weren't a part of government or a partnership with government. Uh, so I think that's what American One Room was, but I still before I say that, and but I guess like what I'm saying is maybe like taking that idea a little farther and like a little bit more and doing like some people in DWE have this idea of doing like a model senate, for example, and just like doing a model senate, understanding of course that it doesn't have any actual legislative power, but just like doing it because it's like meaningful, important to practice a type of democracy that you believe in, and maybe that will others. I think that idea to me seems powerful. But I think, okay, if you know Joe Matthews, he likes to point out that the Constitutional Assembly for the current United States Constitution was done um, outside of the literal reading of the law at the time. So it like wasn't.
Yeah. Do you have any examples of that mode of citizen assemblies taking place? That sounds interesting, but I'm curious if you have any concrete examples.
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. It was. Yeah, extra constitutional. I've not yet heard of or met Joe Matthews, but that's something Nick Kakoma has shared with me, and I've read about because when people talk about, well, we've never had a second constitutional convention before or one outside of the laws, like actually, yeah, what we have now was extra constitutional, i.e., illegal, but done by and for the people if you were a white, like probably slave owning landowner. um, so not to our best standards, but that's what took place. Actually, to go back to what you were saying though about like these kind of like experimental citizen assemblies running, um, that's kind of how I'm thinking about how I'd like to do Undetermined States of America. Like our live events is kind of run kind of citizens assemblies, but have them be for like very big visionary ideas. Like this author who I've met wrote, Sarah Horowitz wrote this book called Mutualism, which talks about kind of community-based, the community-based sector, the mutualized sector in the economy, like cooperatives, labor unions, religious faith organizations, aid networks. I'm just like really inspired by that idea. Is like here's a way we can think about the economy and maybe even like subsidized Main Street based community based orgs to compete with like the big guys. And it's a very inspiring idea to me, but I'm like there's not really a forum to talk about it. So I was like I'm kind of I don't mean to be asking for advice on my project live on our podcast, but that's how I'm kind of I guess I kind of am is like thinking about if we had people at Undetermined States of America kind of assembling and educating and consensus building around these kind of big visionary ideas. Like, even though it's kind of not going to actually be implemented, it kind of gets people excited about the kind of the process. Because my thinking is that the kind of citizen assemblies I've seen done, and I'm not as well versed as like Phil is on these, but like they're kind of very local and very specific, at least in the United States, and they're only affecting a very small percentage of the people. But if we could run kind of model citizen assemblies, like model UN, model Senate, model autocracy sessions, but on these big visionary ideas like mutualism or what would like universal healthcare look like? Like actually, let's get citizens to actually learn and deliberate on that. Or like, what would we want a progressive foreign policy to look like in America right now? Like, what do American citizens actually want us to do with other nations? How we relate to them in the global field? Anyways, that's kind of how I'm thinking of it. To like uh, think through those kind of visionary ideas to inspire this process to take place, but then also support orgs and work being done to integrate the process into actual policy making decisions.
Like you're building something, like you're building an alternative. Maybe it doesn't have any power, but it is inspiring and it is meaningful, and people can,
Thank
it's
you.
hard to figure out a way like people can still participate it in the assembly. Like how are they a part of that movement? But I think if you go that way, like you're building a movement for an alternative instead of like something that is just like a facilitation product that you're going to be selling around to like organizations and governments. But I mean, like I'm being a little too dismissive of that route because I think that is it's still a way for like building the awareness and stuff. But it's like what if this was like the model assembly itself was like a statement that like people could be a part of and like could identify with. I think like that would be really meaningful to me because I have to tell you like I'm really fed up and sick of what is happening in this country, and I don't like so I'm not happy. And but like what do I do with like all this energy that I
Please.
have about it? Like I would like to put it towards something like that is being built and not just like you know continually do things that don't feel like they're reaching. reaching leadership or, moving the needle on any of these things that I care about. But it's like I would like to be, I would just like to put all of this energy that I have into, um, into like an alternative model that like I can see that is doing good things and making progress. And I think like democracy without elections is a part of that. But I think like I would like to see somebody do something like, taking that. Does that make sense?
What? What's going on? Yeah. Okay, it does, and this might be the podcast where you have convinced me to go in a slightly different direction with this project that I've been mulling over, and you almost just kind of put it so perfectly, and you just re-inspired me. This was the ray of light dove moment live for our listeners, so thank you, Leonora. Because how I was originally conceiving Undetermined States of America, and I actually did a soft launch of it 5 years ago, was I was just like, we need a new country. Like, we need to build a new country from within. And the whole idea is that we are undetermined because we don't really know what we want the country to look like. And there's so many great ideas out there, visionary ideas of what we could be doing, but we don't have a canvas to envision them. And we need to do that again. The problem is, I kept wanting to talk about autocracy and sortition when people asked me the purpose of the project. Like, I kept citing sortition or autocracy as like, here's one example of an idea that's just so inspiring and so good that we should be considering it. And what I'm thinking of, just to pitch you quick, is like kind of fusing these two things and potentially rebranding this project to Laudocratic States of America, and it kind of fuses the best of both of those projects where we do still learn about and envision what we want this new country to look like, but with a Laudocratic framework, like of how we actually go about talking about and deciding those things. So it's kind of building the new in the shell of the old, is practicing the kind of country we want to become, but in a model like starting from like the foundation of sortition or autocracy.
Yeah. Right. But I mean, you can't. We could. possibly get to a place like that without like with a United States
You
where
were
it's
on the
like
fence of staying involved before, but now you're like, you know what? No, I definitely would if this is it.
autocracy
You
don't
know what? I'm convinced.
or why that's
No,
valuable.
I
So it's like
appreciate that.
I think that the project, this kind of project would be great if it's like
LSA. Yeah. That's the whole. I mean, the slogan we could even keep. It's to be determined by and for the people. The idea being like we need to do what the founding fathers did again, but with way more diverse perspectives and a different process. Like, yeah. Well, now I'm leaving also inspired. Not that I wasn't before, but this is good because I'm still trying to figure out how I can help. Um, I mean, one thing it does raise is it does almost sound treasonous in a bit, but like I think that's kind of because it's like, oh, this guy is trying to start a new country from within. But in a way, that is how we were founded. Actually, it's very like we that's it's very American in a way because that's how, as you mentioned, our Constitution now was started. Just like a much, it was like a bunch of dudes, literally a bunch of dudes, some of them in their early 20s, in Philly, eating cheesesteaks in Constitutional Hall, deliberating for like a summer. Met with Alex Guerrero like a few years ago, the author of Autocracy in Jersey, just to talk to him about his ideas, and that's what he's like. Do you realize that this was like just a summer in Philly is what created our current constitution? um, yeah,
yeah. Sorry, my internet cut out for a second there. I think I'm back. Okay. So about the term laudocratic, I like the term laudocratic. I like the term laudocratic. I think, okay, I have a unique take on these things that which is like you you have to have a term where like it can be an identity. Okay, because like a lot of these terms you
yeah,
can't like I can't explain to somebody, that I'm a sortitionist, for
yes,
example. Like that's you can't really be a sortitionist. Although I do say that from time to time. Like I think that like say autocratic, you can like a autocracy is like democracy. Like, I believe in democracy. I believe in autocracy. You can be like a autocratist.
yeah. It's very affirming, and I'm on the verge of tears. But no, this is really, yeah. I'm trying to fuse kind of two disparate. Because exactly what you're, I'm also just thinking. Think of all the talented people we have using their creative capacity to build like the Spider-Man 7 movie or something, or like the next. There's so much people. If they could use just like 10% of their gifts towards building and envisioning our future country together, like that is inspiring to me. And that was the original impetus behind Undetermined States. Um, But someone said that the word undetermined feel like they can't rally behind it because it's kind of like slightly negative sounding. So I don't know. What do you? But a lot of autocratic states of America kind of like we're building from this foundation of sortition. I might have lost you. Oh, we're back. You're back.
I think it's worth exploring for sure.
Let's hear it. Yeah.
Um, deliberative democracy, or
Yeah.
well, I often
Yeah. No, I'm like a, I guess, lottocrat, maybe? That
democracy,
sounds kind of,
okay,
I'm a
talk about
lottocrat.
real
Yeah.
democracy. So I like to frame it.
Or I'm a
I'd like to
lucky
know.
crat. Yeah, lottocrat. Um, yeah. I mean, like I said, I kind of also like the phrase lotto or lottery because it's kind of like a moonshot thing a bit too, and like it's a thin, narrow path, but if it works, like this could really blossom into something big. I like what you're saying, Leonora, and like doing the slow work of like building something ground up, and like sure, constitutional convention's like important, but if you build the community and the culture of like envisioning these things together and like maybe having its own currency, although I'm very like averse to cryptocurrency stuff, but you can it's kind of fun to role play like we're building a country within the country. Um,
Using the
yeah. Well, anything else you would like us to cover? I do kind of want if you I guess my final question is like if you could tell every living American something about deliberative democracy or why they should care about it, what would you say?
um, you know,
Yeah, or sortition or autocracy. Like, if you had the ears of if you were on stage and we somehow were able to fill a 350 million people stadium.
and then like people would be impartial. Yeah. So their name tokens in, so it's like represented here on my tattoo. My tattoo artist is really amazing. And then so they put name tokens in, and then like this part, and like they put from your perspective, but like they put marbles in this hole, like they'd roll down here, and depending on like which marble rolled into which column, that's like how they'd select a column, and then they would either like impanel that column or like keep doing it to get like a smaller selection. And it's like it's so cool because the name tokens, like people valued that process and like that civic duty so much that we have those name tokens because people were buried with them
Not
because like they
matter.
were
Just
so
kidding.
valuable and important
That's
to them. I think
those
about
wouldn't
that all the
matter. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, yeah.
I can't
So those
because
would be
we
centered.
live in this world where
Yeah,
people are very
those would be
distrustful,
central. Yeah,
and they
totally.
mostly feel
It's
like
kind of.
they're not well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the most inspiring things about Autocracy or Sortition is just like it requires a faith in our fellow citizens, our fellow Americans that I think most Americans still have. Like we're pretty extroverted, I think optimistic culture, and And this kind of idea, the original phrase, the motto of the country originally was "E pluribus unum," out of the many, one. And I think we're one of the few countries founded on an ideal, a vision of what human freedom looks like in a pluralistic society. Like, we're not supposed to be founded on an ethnic identity or a religion. Um, but, anyways, yeah, it kind of requires this faith in other people that, and that citizens, we do want the best for what is good for us and our children and grandchildren, and like actual citizens would not be kind of opportunists or trying to focus on like, well, how can I get mine before I go? Like, they're gonna want what's best for their communities and families, and they're gonna think more long term. And yeah, it's just kind of radical optimism. If we believe in democracy, we need to believe in the demos, and I think we do, and the powers that be try to obscure that or fray that or make us afraid of each other. And I'm just really inspired by what you're doing with your work at Democracy in Elections and building local groups of people and modeling sortition through your democratic elected board, and also just like gathering people in person, like meet fellow citizens who care, because we just don't bump elbows enough with each other. And yeah, I'm really inspired by this work that you're doing, Leonora, and that people like you are in this space and following their intuitions and hearts with what inspires them. Because we definitely need an update to the system, as you put it. Please.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Colin. Thanks for having me. Hope to talk to you again soon.
Hell yeah. Is that. Oh, awesome. Is that a sortition box? How would that work? Hmm? Yeah, looks good. Yes. Wow. Wow. Yeah. I wonder how many people were buried with their I voted stickers recently. I did it! That's really moving, and yeah, that's really moving. I think it's really cool that you got a tattoo of that, especially with the story you're sharing about people, or just history lesson of people getting buried with it, because we just, we, I think our civic spirit has been so beaten down by this obsolete system, but I think it's still contained within our fellow citizens. And like, yeah, that the polis is where you do the work of actually enacting the kind of policies and change you want for the flourishing of life for your generation and the next generation. And like, it's impossible to not care about unless you're like a sociopath, or conniving, opportunistic politician. Not that they are all are like that, but you know, they're kind of working in this old system. Say it again? They are. Yeah, or they're molded to become that by the nature of the system they're working in. So thank you for sharing your tattoo. That's really cool, and the history lesson of people being buried with it. Hopefully, we can get there. Future stickers after they do their duty can say, "I deliberated. I deliberated metals." Yes. Well, thank you so much, Leonora. This is really fun conversation. I appreciate you taking the time to join us on Undetermined States of America. Yeah. Likewise, I'll have to do it again.